Travel is usually advertised as a way to broaden your mind, to learn about culture, history, and nature. But for some people, travel is simply a rare opportunity to prove that they're unhappy with absolutely everything. The internet is full of reviews that make you stop and wonder, wait, did they even know where they were going? Some people demanded a refund because the Loch Ness Monster didn't bother showing up on schedule. Others were genuinely angry because a waterfall had too much water, was too loud, and completely refused to cooperate with their freshly styled hair. And that's when you realize the problem isn't the landmarks, it's expectations. Warped expectations where the entire world is expected to operate around personal convenience. What you're about to hear are 31 real complaints. Each one is a moment that makes you pause, take a breath, and ask yourself, are they actually serious? Story 1. Asking for a refund because the Loch Ness Monster didn't show up. Loch Ness is famous for one reason only, a legendary creature that no one is actually sure exists. No clear evidence, no appearance schedule, no warranty. And yet some tourists flew halfway around the world, sat by the lake all afternoon, finished their sandwich, stared at the freezing water, and then concluded, there's no monster. I want a refund. They genuinely left a 1-star review angry that Nessie didn't show up on time. As if this legendary creature has a work schedule, a shift manager, and a customer service department. The problem isn't that they believed in the monster. It's that they believed once they paid for the trip, even the legend was obligated to cooperate. Paying to see a fictional creature, then getting mad when it doesn't appear. That's the moment you stop and ask yourself, is this travel? Or are they just buying a ticket to watch their own imagination? Story 2. Complaining that the Amazon rainforest has too many trees, insects, and no signal. You step into the Amazon rainforest, not the movie version, the real one. Hot, humid, trees everywhere as if someone deliberately planted extra just to hit a quota. Only a few minutes and one tourist starts to panic. They complain there are too many trees, too many insects, and most seriously, their phone has no signal. No 4G, no 5G. Not even a weak little bar to send a desperate message to social media. In their head, the Amazon probably should have felt more like a giant shopping mall. Wide walkways, air conditioning, free Wi-Fi, clear signs pointing everywhere. They were genuinely angry that they couldn't live stream from the middle of the jungle, as if nature itself had failed by not upgrading its telecommunications infrastructure. The problem isn't that the Amazon is too wild. It's that someone walked into a rainforest and expected it to function like an Apple store. Story 3. Complaining that the Great Wall is too long and has too many steps. The Great Wall was built to overwhelm people. So long that your eyes can't find the end. Winding across mountains with absolutely no intention of making anyone comfortable. And then there's a tourist standing on it, out of breath after 20 minutes of climbing, staring at the endless stairs and thinking, this is a bit much. They leave a 1-star review complaining that the wall is too long, the steps are too many, and it's completely unfriendly to modern human needs. The most shocking part is a very serious question. Why isn't there an escalator or an elevator here, as if the builders thousands of years ago simply forgot to plan for 21st century tourists? The problem isn't that the Great Wall is exhausting. It's that someone climbed an ancient defensive structure and expected it to function like an air-conditioned shopping mall. Story 4. Complaining that the Grand Canyon is just a big hole full of rocks. The Grand Canyon stretches out before you like a massive scar cut straight into the surface of the earth. Layers of rock stacked upon each other, colors shifting with the sunlight so deep your brain needs a few seconds just to process its scale. And then someone stands at the edge, looks down, thinks very seriously, and leaves a 1-star review. Their reasoning is incredibly simple. It's just a hole. Sure, it's big, but it's still a hole. They complain it's all rocks and dirt, that even taking a helicopter just means seeing more rocks from a different angle. And while everyone else is trying to absorb the awe, they casually drop this unforgettable comparison. I've got a few holes like this behind my house. The problem isn't that the Grand Canyon lacks impact. It's that someone looked at one of the greatest natural wonders on Earth and judged it by the same standard as a pothole in a parking lot. Story 5. Being afraid the Leaning Tower of Pisa looks unsafe and asking to straighten it. The Tower of Pisa is famous for one very specific reason it leans. Not slightly. It leans enough to make you tilt your own head just looking at it. The tower leans because of weak ground, because construction stretched on for hundreds of years, and because gravity has never been joking around. But for some tourists, none of that matters as much as one feeling this looks dangerous. They leave a 1-star review expressing genuine concern that the tower looks like it's about to fall over. Then they suggest a very reasonable solution. At least in their mind, the city should fix it, straighten it, so it looks like a normal tower and feels safer. The only small problem is, if the tower were straight, who would fly halfway around the world just to take a photo, pretending to hold it up? That's like complaining a rainbow has too many colors or that pizza has too much cheese. Story 6, giving 1 star because Old Faithful erupted a few minutes late. Old Faithful is famous for one thing only. It erupts on a cycle. Not perfectly precise, but consistent enough to make people feel a little bit safe. And then there's a tourist standing there, watch on their wrist eyes locked on the geyser, like they're waiting for a subway train. When it erupts a few minutes later than the ranger's prediction, they immediately conclude very unprofessional. They leave a 1-star review complaining they stood in the cold and only saw steam, that the schedule was unclear, that everything felt very disorganized. They genuinely seem to believe the Earth has a customer service department and somewhere underground there's an employee pressing a button behind schedule. The problem isn't that Old Faithful is unreliable. It's that someone expects nature to operate like a public transportation system and is perfectly willing to complain when the planet itself isn't on time. Story 7. Asking to install giant fans to blow the clouds away from Mount Fuji. Mount Fuji is famous for looking perfect in photos. A snow-covered peak, blue skies, no clouds, at least in the brochure. Then some tourists fly to Japan, wait for hours camera ready, and the only thing they see is clouds. Clouds everywhere. Clouds blocking everything. Clouds doing exactly what clouds have always done. They leave a 1-star review angry they couldn't see the summit. And in their very serious disappointment, they suggest a solution that sounds straight out of a cartoon. The government should install giant fans to blow the clouds away during peak tourist hours. Not regular fans, but fans big enough to manage the weather. In their mind, nature works like a stage, and the weather is careless backstage staff. The problem isn't that Fuji is unpredictable. It's that someone genuinely believes once they've booked a plane ticket, even the clouds should know to work around the schedule. Story 8. Complaining that Niagara Falls has too much water and is too loud. Niagara Falls is a waterfall. The name literally includes the word falls, which means waterfalls. It's famous for massive amounts of water, thunderous noise that carries for miles, and the feeling that nature is basically shouting directly in your face. And then a tourist stands in front of it, listens for a few seconds, and leaves a 1-star review. Their reasoning is very clear: too much water, too loud, and completely unfriendly to freshly styled hair. They complain the noise gives them a headache, the mist soaks their clothes, and suggest management should reduce the flow during off-peak hours. As if somewhere there's a giant valve, and with one gentle twist the entire waterfall would politely slow down. The problem isn't that Niagara is too intense. It's that someone visited one of the world's most famous waterfalls and expected it to behave like a decorative fountain in a shopping mall. Story 9. Complaining that Machu Picchu has no Wi-Fi or McDonald's. Machu Picchu sits high in the Andes Mountains built by the Inca centuries ago. Tightly fitted stone, slow-drifting clouds, history everywhere, and absolutely no fast food signs. Yet some tourists climb all the way up, out of breath, sweat-soaked look around the ancient ruins and start getting annoyed. Not because of the altitude, but because their phone can't connect to Wi-Fi. They look for a signal. There isn't one. They look for familiar food, no McDonald's either. And so a 1-star review is born, complaining about limited food options, poor connectivity, and an experience that's not user-friendly. In their mind, the Inca Empire made a serious strategic mistake by not planning ahead for burgers and strong signal. The problem isn't that Machu Picchu is too ancient. It's that someone stepped into a historic wonder and still expected to order a Big Mac combo while admiring centuries-old ruins. Story 10. Complaining about the Sistine Chapel because the paintings are on the ceiling. The The Sistine Chapel is famous for having some of the greatest ceiling paintings in human history. Michelangelo spent years painting an entire world above humanity's heads. Angels, saints, masterpieces placed exactly where no one could miss them. And then a tourist walks in, looks up for a few minutes, rubs their neck, and decides to leave a one-star review. Their reason is very simple: bad design. Who paints on a ceiling? They complain that looking up too long hurts their neck, that crowds standing around staring upward are inconvenient, and that the Vatican should place the artwork at eye level instead, or hang it on the walls, or project it onto the floor. In their eyes, a Renaissance masterpiece has failed by not meeting modern ergonomic standards. The problem isn't that the paintings are too high. It's that someone walked into one of humanity's greatest artistic treasures and judged it like a product with poor neck-friendly design. Story 11, complaining that the Liberty Bell is cracked and asking for a new one. The Liberty Bell is one of the most important historical symbols of the United States. It has hung there for hundreds of years, witnessing war, independence, and countless history lessons. And then a tourist stands in front of it, looks at the famous crack nods for a few seconds, and leaves a one-star review. Their reasoning is very clear: the bell is broken. In their view, a national symbol with a crack is simply unacceptable. They even suggest casting a brand new bell shiny, perfect, and intact to better match the ticket price and the expectations of modern visitors. The problem is that crack is the history. History isn't a household item you can return because it got scratched. If everything old were replaced with a flawless new version, then in the end, we'd be left with nothing but perfect objects, and no history left to tell. Story 12, complaining that Stonehenge is just a pile of rocks in a field. Stonehenge sits in the middle of an open field, steady wind, slow-moving clouds, and massive stones standing there, as if they've grown used to being stared at by humans for thousands of years. No neon signs, no dramatic soundtrack, no one clearly explaining where the highlight is, just stones, standing still, for a very long time. Then a tourist looks around for a few minutes, nods, pulls out their phone, and leaves an impressively brief review. It's just rocks. In their mind, these stones are no different from the ones in their backyard. If they drove this far, the place should at least look more impressive, have effects, have that worth the money feeling. But Stonehenge was never built for quick impact. It isn't an amusement park. It's a question with no clear answer. And sometimes the oldest things don't need to be fun to be meaningful. Story 13, complaining that the Eiffel Tower is just a useless pile of iron. Paris is known as the city of romance, and the Eiffel Tower is its symbol. A massive iron structure standing in the middle of the city, built simply to be looked at. You go up. The wind blows. All of Paris spreads out below your feet. And then a tourist stands at the top, looks around for a few minutes, and leaves a one-star review. Their reasoning is very straightforward. There's nothing to do except look at the view. No games, no shows, no interactive buttons. In their opinion, a world-famous structure should offer more entertainment, at least something to keep you busy besides standing still and looking. In that mindset, viewing scenery is treated like wasted time, an experience that isn't productive enough. Technically, if it's just about seeing things from above, Google Earth does it much cheaper. But there's one thing it can never provide: an overpriced crepe eaten in the Paris wind, and the feeling that you were actually there. Story 14, complaining that the Colosseum was never finished. The Colosseum is an ancient Roman arena, once home to gladiators, roaring crowds, and history so dense you almost hear echoes of the past. And then a tourist walks in, looks around at the chipped walls, the broken seating, and feels disappointed. They leave a one-star review for a very simple reason: it looks unfinished. In their view, paying to see a structure with missing walls, broken seats, and no roof is hard to justify. Clearly, in their mind, the Colosseum should look like a brand new stadium. Complete seating, perfect field, that finished feeling. They even suggest rebuilding it to look better to meet modern tourism standards. But the Colosseum has been standing there for nearly 2,000 years. And apparently for some people, 2,000 years still isn't new enough to be worth seeing. Story 15, complaining that the pyramids of Giza are just big triangles. The pyramids stand tall in the middle of the desert, massive, ancient, and built using methods humans still argue about today. Thousands of years pass, and they're still there, challenging the world's curiosity. And then a tourist stands in front of the pyramids, walks around a bit, looks at one side, and delivers a very concise conclusion. That's enough. In their mind, seeing another side wouldn't change anything. A triangle is still a triangle. No need to walk around, no need to stay longer. They also complain that it's too hot, that sand is everywhere, and that the overall experience is uncomfortable. A huge shock, because apparently no one warned them that a desert would feel like a desert. The problem isn't that the pyramids lack wonder. It's that someone stepped into sun and sand and couldn't understand why there was sun and sand. Maybe for them, a geometry book opened straight to the triangle page would have been a cooler and more suitable option. Story 16, complaining that Venice has too many canals and no roads for cars. Venice is a floating city. Buildings rise from water, canals are the roads, boats are the main transportation. That's not a design flaw, that's the entire idea of the city. And then a tourist arrives, rental car keys in hand, looks around once and starts getting confused. No roads for cars, no parking in front of the hotel, no driving straight to the door. Just water. A lot of water. They leave a 1-star review complaining that Venice is inconvenient. In their view, the city should fill in some canals, pave them over, and make transportation more modern. In that mindset, Venice would be better as a giant parking lot with a few historic buildings accidentally placed around it. The problem isn't that Venice is hard to access. It's that when a place exists because it's different, it's very easy to criticize it, simply because it refuses to look like where you came from. Story 17, complaining that the Mona Lisa is too small and boring. The Mona Lisa is the most famous painting in the world. Millions of people fly to Paris just to see a subtle smile painted over 500 years ago. And then a tourist stands in front of the painting, pushes through the crowd, stands on tiptoe, looks for a few seconds, and feels disappointed. They leave a 1-star review for one very specific reason: the painting is too small. In their mind, a globally famous artwork should be bigger, more impressive, and at least visible from far away. They compare the Mona Lisa to a postage stamp, small, dull, and not wow enough for social media photos. In their thinking, great art should function like a highway billboard. The bigger the better. The easier to see, the more worth it feels. But the Mona Lisa was never painted to shock visually. It was painted for you to step closer, look carefully, and wonder why a small painting can make the entire world stand in line inside the Louvre Museum. Art, in the end, is not an advertisement billboard. Story 18, complaining that the Dead Sea is too salty. The Dead Sea is famous for one very clear feature: it's salty. So salty you can lie back on the surface and not sink. The name says it all, with no subtlety whatsoever. And yet some tourists still get into the water soak for a few minutes, then step out with a completely shocked expression. Burning eyes, stinging skin, tiny cuts suddenly feeling like an interrogation. They leave a 1-star review complaining the water is too salty, uncomfortable, and not relaxing at all like they expected. Apparently, they assumed the Dead Sea would function like a luxury spa with gentle water and calming background music. The problem is, nature doesn't offer a pleasant experience package. It simply does what it is. Everyone loves the feeling of floating effortlessly. It's just that not everyone is ready to accept the price that comes with its salt in every single cell. Story 19, complaining that Mount Rushmore is too far away and asking for an escalator. Mount Rushmore features the faces of 4 U.S. presidents carved directly into a massive granite cliff. A monumental work designed to be seen from a distance where power and time share the same mountain. And then a tourist stands at the viewing area, squints up at the rock, and feels dissatisfied. They complain that the faces are too far away, that they can't see every tiny detail, that standing there doesn't feel worth it. The solution they propose sounds perfectly reasonable in their own head. There should be an escalator, or at least a path leading straight up to the statues' noses, so they can see things up close, for convenience, to justify the drive. In that mindset, everything should be optimized for comfort, even mountains. But Mount Rushmore was never meant to be easily accessed. Some things need to be seen from a distance to be fully understood. Story 20, complaining that the King's Guard won't smile. The changing of the guard by the British Royal Guard is a formal ceremony. Perfect uniforms, flawless formation, expressionless faces. Every detail exists for a reason. And then a tourist stands in front of the line, waves their arms, pulls funny faces, cracks a few jokes just to see if they'll smile. No one smiles. No one reacts. Not even a twitch. So a one-star review appears. The tourist complains that the guards are rude because they won't engage, won't smile, and completely ignore them. In their mind, these soldiers were hired to pose for vacation photos like street performers. But the Royal Guard isn't an entertainment act. They're on duty. Not everyone standing in front of you is obligated to react for your amusement. Sometimes silence is the most important part of the ceremony. Story 21. Complaining that the Hollywood Walk of Fame is just a dirty sidewalk. In many people's imagination, Hollywood is a place where everything sparkles. Bright lights, red carpets, stars everywhere ready to walk out of the nearest cafe. And then a tourist arrives at the Walk of Fame, looks down at the sidewalk, and realizes a hard-to-swallow truth, crowded loud and kind of dirty. They leave a one-star review because the sidewalks are packed. Souvenir shops are crammed together, and the stars underfoot have to share space with old chewing gum. To them, it looks nothing like it does in the movies. The biggest disappointment is the feeling that real-life Hollywood doesn't automatically turn on epic background music. No perfect camera angles. No flattering lighting filter. But movies always choose the best angle. Real life does not. The glow of fame usually looks perfect when you're far enough away and watching it through a screen. Story 22. Complaining that the Parthenon is old and should be fixed or demolished. The Parthenon is a symbol of ancient Greece. White marble columns, perfect proportions, a structure that has stood for thousands of years, surviving wars, earthquakes, and a lot of tourists. And then a visitor walks up the Acropolis, looks at the chipped roof, notices the restoration cranes, and decides it looks a bit messy. They leave a one-star review because the structure looks old, the roof isn't intact, and the restoration ruins their photo angles. In their view, Greece should either fully renovate it or better yet tear it down and build a modern shopping mall or hotel instead. Air conditioning, elevators, a convenient coffee counter. In that mindset, history only has value when it comes with amenities. But the Parthenon was never built to be convenient. It was built to endure, to remind us that time passing is not a design flaw. Being ancient is not being broken. It's exactly why it's still here. Story 23. Complaining that Alcatraz Island is depressing and cold. Alcatraz was once the most notorious prison in the United States. Sitting in the middle of San Francisco Bay winds, blowing year-round cold water surrounding it, and famous for one clear thing: no one came here to feel comfortable. And yet some tourists still walk inside, put on the audio tour, move through empty cells, listen to stories of years spent imprisoned, and then leave a one-star review. Their reasoning is fairly simple. The atmosphere is gloomy, the weather is cold, and there aren't comfortable places to sit and rest. To them, the experience feels too heavy and not tourist-friendly enough. Apparently, in their mind, a historic prison should come with soft seating, pleasant temperatures, and a more relaxing vibe. Almost like a resort, just with a prison theme. But Alcatraz was never built for relaxation. It was designed to make people feel isolated and uncomfortable. That cold, bleak feeling isn't a flaw. It's exactly what this place is meant to make you feel. Story 24. Complaining that the Little Mermaid statue is too small. The Little Mermaid statue is a symbol of Copenhagen. Sitting quietly on a rock by the seaside, small, modest, and with absolutely no intention of overwhelming anyone. And then a tourist stands in front of the statue, looks around for a few seconds, and starts to feel disappointed. In their mind, the Little Mermaid should look like the Disney version. Bigger, more dramatic, hair flowing in the wind, water splashing everywhere, and ideally, singing. They leave a one-star review because the statue is too small, too quiet, and doesn't do anything. To them, a famous symbol should feel like an entertainment attraction, not something that just sits there and exists. But the Little Mermaid was never created to perform. It's a moment, a feeling, a very Nordic kind of subtlety. The problem is, subtlety often gets mistaken for being bland, especially when you're expecting an outdoor theme park. Story 25. Complaining that the Palace of Versailles has too much gold. Versailles is a palace of excess, gold everywhere, on the ceilings, on the walls, on anything that can be gilded without collapsing. And then a tourist walks in, looks around a few rooms, squints, and leaves a one-star review. Their reasoning is very straightforward. Too much gold, too bright, too flashy. In their view, the palace looks showy and completely lacking subtlety. In their mind, a world-famous place should be more restrained, more gentle, less extravagant. The irony is, Versailles was built to do the exact opposite. It exists to display power to overwhelm visitors and to remind everyone that Louis XIV had absolutely no interest in modesty. Complaining about wealth at Versailles is like complaining that pizza has too much cheese. That's not a flaw. That's the entire experience. Story 26. Complaining that the Times Square is too bright and too loud. Times Square is the beating heart of New York City. LED screens everywhere, traffic noise, crowds. A place famous for one thing, never being quiet. And then a tourist stands in the middle of the square, shields their eyes, grimaces, and decides to leave a one-star review. Their reasoning is very clear: too bright, too loud, too many people. According to them, the place causes headaches and offers absolutely no sense of relaxation. Apparently, they expected Times Square to function like a peaceful park. Stone benches, birdsong, soft lighting. But New York is called the city that never sleeps for a reason. Times Square is not a shared bedroom. It's a stage of light and motion. Not every place is meant for rest. Some places exist to remind you that the world is always loud and you're standing right at the center of it. Story 27. Complaining that the London Eye spins too slowly. The London Eye is London's famous observation wheel. From the top, you can see the entire city stretching out below. The River Thames winding through. Rooftops getting smaller. Everything moving slowly, exactly as it was designed to. And then a tourist steps into the cab and stands there for a bit, glances at their watch and starts to feel bored. They leave a one-star review because the wheel moves too slowly. No excitement, no surprise, no heart-pounding feeling they were hoping for. In their mind, a world-famous attraction should be more dramatic. At the very least, it should spin faster, or have a sudden burst of speed to make it feel worth the money. Clearly, in their head, the London Eye got confused with a roller coaster. One thing is for sightseeing, another is for screaming. The London Eye was never built to scare you. It exists to give you time to look around. And in this case, slow is not a flaw. Slow is the experience. Story 28. Complaining that Ben Nevis is too tall and too steep. Ben Nevis is the highest mountain in the United Kingdom. Tall, very tall, steep, very steep, and it makes no effort to hide that fact. Yet some tourists start the climb walk for a while, begin gasping for air, and suddenly feel like they've been scammed. They leave a one-star review with a very serious complaint: the mountain is too high and the trail is too steep. According to them, no one warned them that climbing a mountain would require climbing upward for several hours straight. Some even suggest there should be a flatter path, or at least a reduced incline, so that everyone can access it. As if Ben Nevis was supposed to function like a hotel hallway. Flat, easy to walk, and suitable for rolling a suitcase without breaking a sweat. The problem isn't that Ben Nevis is too harsh. It's that someone entered nature with the expectations of a convention center. Nature doesn't have elevators, and it doesn't apologize for that. Story 29. Complaining about not being allowed to go into the White House for tea. The White House is a symbol of American power. The president's workplace, the center of major decisions, and quite clearly not an afternoon tea cafe. Yet some tourists stand outside the security fence, look inside, and feel offended. They leave a one-star review because they weren't invited in. No tea, no free roaming, not even a glimpse of the Oval Office from the sidewalk. In their view, security is too strict, the fences are too high, and the experience is completely unfriendly. In their mind, the president should appear like a Disneyland character, waving, smiling, taking photos, on repeat every hour. But the White House is not a fan meet and greet. It's where power operates, and power rarely opens its doors to random passers-by. Some places aren't designed to welcome visitors. And in this case, distance is part of the meaning. Story 30. Complaining that a coral reef has too many fish. A coral reef is an ecological wonder. Clear water, vivid coral. fish of every color swimming back and forth like an underwater party. And then a tourist puts on snorkeling goggles, jumps into the water, looks around for a few seconds, and panics. Too many fish. Swimming close, swimming everywhere, swimming exactly where they've always lived. They leave a 1-star review because the experience feels overwhelming. In their view, it would be more comfortable if the tour could remove some of the fish so swimming would be easier, quieter, less alive. As if the ocean were a hotel swimming pool and the fish were uninvited guests. In that mindset, nature is only acceptable when it's tidy, perfectly spaced, and doesn't startle anyone. But a coral reef isn't a staged attraction. It's a home for fish. And you're just visiting. Walking into someone else's home and complaining that it's too crowded usually says more about the guest than it does about the house. Story 31. Complaining that the Statue of Liberty is smaller than expected. The Statue of Liberty is a symbol of the United States. Freedom, hope, history lessons cast in copper and time. And then a tourist stands on the ferry, squints from a distance, and starts to feel underwhelmed. They leave a 1-star review because the statue is smaller than expected. In their mind, a national symbol should be so large you can see it from every borough, or at least big enough that you don't need to zoom your camera. In their head, the Statue of Liberty matches the size of an imagination fed by movies posters and exaggerated textbooks. When reality doesn't line up, disappointment follows. But expectations have a habit of growing larger than the truth. And not everything with great meaning needs to occupy a lot of square footage. The statue stands there unchanged. Only the viewer's perspective shifts. And sometimes the gap between myth and reality is exactly where we begin to see things more calmly. After all these stories, one thing becomes very clear. It's not that the places are strange. It's that human expectations sometimes go a bit too far. The truth is, every one of us has complained unreasonably at least once. Not because we're stupid, but because the human brain is very good at imagining things as more perfect than reality. So now it's your turn. Is there a place you've ever visited and thought, yeah, this isn't quite what I imagined? Have you ever complained about something that now looking back just makes you laugh? Share it in the comments. No judgment, just very human stories. And if you enjoy this kind of storytelling, funny but thoughtful, don't forget to subscribe to the channel so we can keep exploring together.